So the stream should be live now. I like very last second decided to do this, and I know I haven't made a video in a long time, so I don't know if anyone will be notified or if people will come and watch. But I don't know. I felt like talking some Pokemon, so I decided to just the double echo intro. Seems like the sound is working okay. Yeah, so if people do get notified and do come in, feel free to ask me questions. So for those who don't know me, my name's Jake, and I've been doing Pokemon full time as a reseller with my business partner for about closing in on about 8 months now. But definitely very engaged in the hobby as a collector for many years, and a speculator, and then a bit of a flipper reseller for about 6 or so years, 6, 7 years, 8 years, something like that. Yeah. So a couple people in here, some familiar names. How's it going, Dan and Travels? Classique, Fat Boy Collects. How are you? Pokeneer, Poke Chef, Poke Slam, Charizard Perfection. So like, this is just going to be a Q&A. So you guys can ask me anything about the hobby, about what it's like to be a reseller, about both on the emotional sort of front and the experiential front, as well as, if you want to ask me specific questions about the market or selling or collecting. I'm a bigger collector now than I've ever been, so I'm working on. I made some nice progress on some sets and some different collection goals, and I'm slowly working towards those. People want to ask me questions about life. Yeah, I won't be in Chicago, Fat Belly. But I will be in New Jersey in a couple weeks for people. So if anyone's there, come say hey. Hopefully I'll see a bunch of you guys. Let's see. So Marty asks, cool to see you live again. Any new TCGs you've started to collect, or what cards have you been targeting lately, Pokemon or other sets? So let's see. No other TCGs. I still am definitely collecting some Star Wars, a little bit here and there, particularly like one of ones that I like, things that are just like, it's like a fun chase that they come up every once in a long while. Not a TCG though. That's just I like the non-TCG stuff there. Just a collectible trading cards, I guess. As far as like what I'm collecting in Pokemon, so for a while I was completing, or I'm still missing like a couple, but like the mid-era into X and Y, particularly like the black and white, but also those were the more expensive ones, like the full art Japanese cards. I've always long been a fan of those. I remember a long time ago, I haven't talked to him in ages, but I know Coulson, a name that I haven't seen him in probably a year, but was always into those, and I also enjoy them. It's one of the few Japanese collections that I focus on. Mostly I prefer English and enjoy English. Finishing, I have one gold star left to complete my collection. I have one Neo Shining left to complete my collection, and I've been working on the Neo Shinings. I've basically been trying to complete my vintage collection slowly over the last year and a half or so, kind of buying cheap auctions that I think are a little bit under market, cards or areas that I think are a little bit relatively undervalued, underappreciated, underknown, don't have as much attention on them. The usual stuff, just slowly trying to complete those things. And then once I complete them, I don't know what I'll do. I don't know if I'll like ever go back to like what I used to do, which was like try to do a little bit of speculation and buy multiple copies of certain things, or if I'll just be satisfied with one of each card, but we shall see. But yeah, that's what I've been doing in Pokemon. And trying to get all of the original Nintendo like small EX cards in like 9 or 10. And I actually have my business, and I've sold all of my binders and all of my raw copies, and I'm just collecting graded cards because it's a way for me to like get a little bit more chase, but also like not have endless amounts. So I'm trying to like zone in and target on my favorite sets, my favorite types of cards, and just doing like one of each graded card in a 9 or 10. That's been pretty satisfying recently. Particularly like when you're flipping and reselling Pokemon constantly and making money from it, it's much easier. It's irrational on some level, but it's much easier to like justify treating yourself to an expensive card that I might not have years ago. Still playing b-ball. Yep. Still playing basketball 2 to 3 days a week. Would you ever stream on eBay Live or whatnot? How do you feel about the future of live stream selling? This week I've actually been thinking more about, would I, as the streamer, ever try that? I've definitely thought about like if I ever met someone, or I already am friends with a number of streamers, maybe teaming up at some point in the future. But I've been thinking about like, would I ever give that a try myself? And the future of live stream selling, I think as long as people as long as people are enjoying the hobby and there's a hobby here, live stream selling will be a massive part of the hobby. Cause it's just the convenient, I mean, and really it has nothing to do with Pokemon, just like any sort of like live stream selling or online selling is in general the wave of the future, likely for so much consuming across the world. So I think platforms, even platforms like Whatnot and I forget the names of some of the ones that are in Asia that I was talking to someone about, that don't even do Pokemon or trading cards, but do a variety of other goods. These are unbelievable multi-billion-dollar operations, and they are just selling so much. And when you combine like the fun of like the high of the dopamine hit of buying something, the dopamine hit of like the auction or pack opening, with the other people are there to watch with you, with the convenience, with the fact that it charges your credit card automatically, like obviously it's a home run. Is it healthy? People have to you should limit yourself from those things, because they're definitely geared to make you overspend, have a tendency to overspend, just like a casino might. But from the business side of it, the business perspective of it, it's definitely a great business model. And as long as people continue to want these things, and I like them and continue to want them, all of that should be doing well. My real question is like, could I enjoy and have the stamina for streaming and having like a streaming schedule and those types of things? Dan says Charlotte. Definitely going to Charlotte too. Vendor POV videos have really taken off lately. Consider giving it a try. Seems to really help bring people to booths. I can't imagine. I mean, I can't imagine doing it, just because it would make me feel uncomfortable, like I'm performing or I'm putting on a show, and my attention would kind of be split between like I'm entertaining and putting on some sort of content show while I'm also trying to like treat someone respectfully and get a good deal for myself and for the business. It's like I don't know, that seems unpleasant. It would turn what's a really fun and frankly a really large part of my business, which is vending, and I can go more into that. Like I vending right now is the vast majority of my sales, at least in the last few months, although it does come and go with eBay. But yeah. What's the vibe tonight? Hey, Walrus. The truth, like poking there are lots of things that you could do to help, your business, grow or make more money, but unless you can sustain them and unless you can figure out a way to sort of enjoy that process, it's probably more likely to burn you out and actually hurt your business, I think, in the long run. I think there's a lot of things, in every job, where there are elements of that job that might help you or, get you a promotion or, help you grow your business. But if they burn you out and hurt your mental health, like your business will suffer in the end. And if your business doesn't suffer, your mental health and your quality of life certainly will. Your live call-in show with Gary literally gave me the motivation. That's awesome. Certainly remember your name and remember talking to you on one of the call-in shows. Hopefully you're doing well and everything's good in your life. What's the vibe tonight? Jake, are you coming to New Jersey CollectCon? I am, yeah. Side note, what a world we live in. Just heard an assassination attempt on Trump. Can we both go back to just ripping packs peacefully? Yeah, I was watching YouTube, and then all of a sudden I started to see videos come up because I watch a fair amount of political content, sort of across the political spectrum, and it's I don't really know what to say about it other than it's hard to believe and it's scary, and it's obviously it's an extension. For those who don't know, I was a therapist for many years, and I worked with people who had, significant mental health challenges and had lots of violent tendencies, or were very, very, very angry at certain people or the world, and had certain delusions one way or the other, and we're at risk of acting violently. So I don't know who. I don't think there's information yet about who did the shooting, but yeah, it's likely. That's the most likely scenario, is that it was someone ill and someone who has a lot of hatred towards Donald Trump, or I don't know. I won't go into politics more than just saying that it's horrific. Like anytime someone feels hate, that type of hate towards anyone, whether there are good reasons or not good reasons to go to that sort of length, it's horrific. Let's see. How would a global recession impact the Pokemon TCG market, or has Pokemon ever experienced a recession like Magic? So I mean, this is something like I used to get asked this question quite a bit about. It's so hard to keep track of time now. I really don't come on YouTube anymore too much, but I think like 2 years ago. So before like Battle Styles right around the time of Battle Styles came out, there was a lot of like, I would say between like Shining Fates and a little bit after Shining Fates into sort of Battle Styles, Evolving Sky, Chilling Reign, Evolving Skies during the Sword and Shield block. There was a lot of questions and a lot of talk generally about the inflationary environment we were in, how would that impact the United States economy, the broader world economy? Would there be massive layoffs? Lots of questions trying to predict, what might happen. It always feels a little silly to me. I think those macro conversations are interesting, but they're so far removed in many cases from like what we can control that for sure, if you are seeing signs in an economy of an issue, and a lot of smart economists are telling people to be careful, I think it makes sense to take a look at all of your assets and think, what is this asset? What are the fundamentals of this asset, and how is it likely to perform in this type of environment? The issue with doing that is that it can be very hard to predict. For example, people thought during when the pandemic first started that there was going to be a massive recession. The stock market was plummeting initially, and people thought Pokemon was going to, who would buy Pokemon, and Pokemon cards were all going to go down in value. And instead we had the biggest boom ever in the hobby because the consequences of the pandemic were actually that people had, in many cases, had more discretionary income, getting money from the government, and had more time on their hands, needed an indoor hobby, and had more money because they weren't spending it on vacations, or, et cetera, et cetera. So there's just so many factors. And your question, has Pokemon ever experienced a recession like Magic? The whole recession, it's too new. Like, to me, it's hard to use those terms for pop culture collectibles in general, and it certainly feels too new. I know, like, someone like Rudy will use that term probably and uses market terms, and I'm not saying that it doesn't apply on some level, but it feels a little bit like premature almost to judge what does a recession look like? Like, are we still in a bubble right now? Are we still booming? And then in 5 to 10 years from now, will there be a real recession in terms of interest in Pokemon, or will the hobby continue to escalate and grow? I think it has more to do with demand and sort of long-term interest, and do people stay engaged, and are people having fun, than global, barring very significant global changes. Probably. I think the global changes can have an impact on the edges, but so much of the movement we've seen the last couple of years really, I think, has very little to do with global recession or not, and more to do with like a not that large group of people speculating intensely on the future of a pop culture collectible. And when I say not that many, I don't know, you want to throw out 100,000 people or 200,000 people who are putting lots and lots of money into this. And of course, the vast majority of people who are collecting or engaging in Pokemon are not one of those 100,000. They're the millions and millions of people who are buying an occasional pack, but that's not what's driving the price up of the Moonbryon or driving the price up of vintage car, drove the price of vintage cards, or gold stars tripling again over the last, doubling again in price over the last couple months. That's not impacting that. That's really people, a smaller group of people, either buying stuff they like or FOMOing into stuff, and the various sort of degrees of that. And we'll have to see. I mean, I always like to look at the sports card hobby as sort of it's the longest, oldest, most established, largest card hobby there is for cues about how things might go in the long run. I don't think Magic is big enough, nor do I think Magic has been around long enough, nor do I think Magic has the appeal of Pokemon as far as an IP to really be a good measure indicator. Now, will Pokemon sustain its popularity? Is Pokemon as popular as like basketball, or one of the initial sports? It seems hard to believe that it would be on some level. And I do worry that it won't like connect with future generations like basketball might. But the numbers would, would suggest that maybe that's not necessarily the case, and maybe it's possible that some pop culture phenomenon can be a lot more collectible and a lot bigger than sports. So certainly in the sports world, there are cards, there are items that are worth tens of millions of dollars that are not as rare as certain Pokemon items that are, so it becomes a question of, in the long run, there certainly is an example of something very similar that became extraordinarily more valuable than Pokemon is right now. So I think, on the long-term upside, there are always those possible upside potentials. Am I only collecting cardboard? Well, I don't know if I call it collecting, but I like to sometimes I get these like sitting cuties and different things. I collect some sports memorabilia, variety of sports memorabilia, but not too much. I've almost gotten like slightly into comic books a few times. I have a feeling that if I stay in cards for a really long time and I make a lot of progress in my collecting here, eventually I might, and I still have money, excess money to spend, I might start dabbling in some of that. Hardest part and best part about leaving your day job, traditional career to pursue collectibles Pokemon full time. I would say the best part is not having a boss and having a lot more freedom to make my own schedule, to not be, I don't have that, the feeling weighing over me that I might get called into an office and scolded for doing something wrong, or, like I'm a child getting called into the principal's office. And I get to be sort of in charge of, with my partner together in making decisions. And both of us have a lot of freedom, the way we have it structured, to kind of make decisions. And that's fun and exciting and creative. And it works well for my personality. I was not someone who, I'm someone who's a little bit more of a, I guess, on the spectrum. Like, I prefer to be sort of a self-starter and do something I'm passionate about, rather than doing something I find repetitive and boring, but sort of doing it over and over again, is not for me. Although there are definitely lots of repetitive parts of this job that, although I get to choose if I do them or not, if I don't do them, I don't make money. So, so I would say the hardest part about, so that's from like my enjoyment. The other part that I think about is just the ethics of, like, was my last job, helping more people, better use of my energy in some sort of moral way? Am I hurting myself and potentially other people by being in a career that's very focused on money and making deals and negotiating all of the time? It definitely plays on the game playing part of my brain versus like the empathy, human connection part. Being a therapist was definitely about that. And so like the long-term effects of that, both on my personality and then on the way that I treat other people and the impact I might have on people around me or people I come in contact with, I think is something that, yet to be determined, something I'm trying to be, conscious of and trying to figure my way through. So that's a hard part. Another hard part is, I mean, the repetitiveness of certain aspects of it, like the grind of pricing, of the anxiety of not knowing if you'll be able to sell something, how much it will sell for, the anxiety of not knowing will you be able to buy something again to resell, there's a lot of constant unknowns, and there's not a lot of like time to celebrate or feel like that much, at least the way I've done it so far. And again, I'm new to it, so I'm still trying to figure out how to probably develop a little bit of a mindset, of some sort that will allow me to kind of appreciate the growth and the moments, rather than just always sort of like, okay, that was great, that worked out amazing, on to the next deal. Where's the next deal going to come from? Where's the next buy going to come from? Where's the next sale going to come from? There's a lot of that constant churning. So I would say that is can be rewarding and exciting, but it can also be really it can be challenging. And sometimes I'll be like, it's amazing that I can just make my own schedule and I can just like take a week off if I want, or go travel somewhere if I want. But it's a bit difficult I have to like work a little bit at times to compartmentalize and not always be thinking about cards or always be checking eBay, the stuff that common sense stuff that I think most people in this would feel. Overall, I would say that it's a great job. It's something that takes a lot of, I do think it takes a lot of skill and time in the hobby and engagement before I would take the leap and I would build something small first. And it takes a certain type of person, I think, to do it, who is interested in negotiating and buying and selling and, that sort of thing. But yeah, I was watching, one of the reasons I jumped on tonight, probably the only reason I jumped on, was because I saw Z&G's video pop up on my stream, and I just enjoyed listening to him talk. So I was like, oh, it'd be fun to hop on and talk about Pokemon like he's talking about Pokemon. And he was talking about how he feels like, and this was just one video. I don't want to take it too out of context here, but what I took from the video was that some amount of like, wow, this space is getting quite competitive and people are growing very quick. And, if you're a smaller, it maybe some of the opportunities might dry up. And he certainly made a few caveats saying like, of course, if you work hard and you're passionate, there are probably always ways to make some inroads. And I do agree with him to some extent. I think even in the last 8 months, I felt some changes in some areas, and I do feel constant pressure to evolve and like compete at a high level. I don't feel like what I'm doing is easy or simple. I feel like what I'm doing takes a lot from me, both my focus, my attention, my knowledge about the hobby, and my skills in whatever, relationships, networking, communication. Like it's not something that it's like, there isn't investing going on. Like a lot of people got into Pokemon and they just sort of bought things at market or near market and then sold it weeks later at a higher volume. That's not what the business is. The business relies on, buying low and then selling higher, or buying a little bit low and then selling a bit higher. So and there really are a lot of skills that go into that, and a lot of effort and hard work that go into that. And particularly if you're trying to scale it up, and I'm trying to build something that at least supports, very full time me and my business partner, let alone other people we might bring on. And so it's challenging. It's challenging for sure. Anyway, long-winded answer. Leaf Green Goblin says, is it still considered collecting if my friend keeps asking me which cards I think are underrated? Is it still considered collecting? You mean is your friend collecting? I think that I think that I just read Walrus's comment. Jake afraid to get caught lowballing on that vendor POV. Oh God. No, I'm anyway. So distracting. Okay, Leaf Green Goblin. Is it still considered collecting? My friend keeps asking me which cards I think are underrated. I think that To answer the question somewhat seriously, I think that the way that I collect, I'm always aware. First of all, I have only so much money, so I'm always trying to get cards at the best deal I can, and I'm always trying to buy cards that I think will go up in value or stay the same, right? In many cases, I'm buying cards that I think that I just hope will stay the same. Like, these are cards I want in my collection, and I'd rather not pay for the card one day and then 2 years from now it's worth like 1/10 of what it's worth now. Oh, I should have just waited, right? I think that's all what I would consider part of collecting. Part of the high of collecting, the fun of collecting, can be the money side. So I think a lot of people who are collecting are interested in the money side, particularly adults. Almost all of them, probably kids too. I think it's pretty natural, and I think it's exciting to have like expensive cards, and it feels good when you look at your collection and you're like, "Ooh, I'm enjoying looking at these, and they're going up in value." I think that's a natural thing for people. I do think there are people out there who like couldn't care less, and they just want stuff that like looks cool and looks the way they want, and they hope it stays cheap. And I think that's awesome too. Paul N says, my apologies if this has been answered already. I've been watching your videos since COVID. Appreciate that. I've transitioned from Pokemon to Lorcana. Oh, what are your thoughts on Lorcana? I honestly, I don't follow Lorcana. I do notice that I see, I do quite a bit of vintage Disney. And so I'm a little bit aware of Lorcana through that, and I could talk plenty about the vintage Disney market. But yeah, I don't know too much about Lorcana. I do sell some Lorcana cards when I get them in collections, but I don't go after them. Yeah, so I don't really have too much share. I think that's cool. Hopefully it's going well for you. I see people when I go to the shows, I see there's some like just like all Lorcana booths now at Collecticon. So clearly it's doing well. I've seen definitely an increase in Lorcana, Naruto, definitely big popular one. And you know, as far as their longevity, I'm not following it or engaged enough really to have an opinion one way or another. But I appreciate you, Paul, and that's cool that you're, you know, doing something that you enjoy. Hey, what's up, Zach? It's been a little bit. I don't think I've seen you. When was the last time I saw you? It was the last time like in Dallas Collecticon, maybe? Oh no, I saw you at Card Party. Gosh, they all run together, these shows, but so it was a pleasure running India. Hey Shagnasty, how are you doing? Jake, tips on grading raw top zone hollows. Tips. I don't know if I have any tips. I'm not one to like use, you know, these kits, so I don't know too much about them. I don't know if they can magically repair those top zone cards. I will say that if by the top zone hollows you mean like the Prism, like the 1995, I assume you mean, and I assume you mean the Prism cards from that set, definitely super hard to grade. On the flip side, even the low graded ones, even ones with like condition issues, can look very nice and have nice eye appeal and can still be like very sellable, because the almost similar to like the Legendary Collection hollow pattern, they can hide the damage pretty well and still, I think, look attractive and be like a cool looking collectible in a low grade. And for those who don't know what those are, they're fairly, I think they were like I want to say they're like 1 in 40 packs. They come in with both the blue back and the green back top zone boxes. There's no difference in the prisms. Yeah, I think they're I always thought they were cool cards. You know, there's a lot of cool stuff, I think, pre-TCG Japanese stuff from those eras, and a lot of it's become, you know, not necessarily top zone, like the ones that were and had really big booms, like top zone, like the 97 Cardass, like the 98 Magi, like those. I don't think that they've. I mean, some of them are so low pop, like the sales are up and down. Obviously, you had like massive blue back top zone Charizard sales that have come like way back to earth. But there have been like other cards that I've started to sell a lot more, like little like those DX gold cards, the oh gosh, what are the Zucan card, like I'm sure I'm pronouncing these things wrong, that have just been popular and good general sellers. And if it looks cool and it's got that sort of vintage feel, there seems to be a collector for it or some interest. Appreciate the kind comment, Christian. Nice to see you. Well, hopefully I'll go live more. I didn't know if anyone was going to show up because I don't come on anymore. So I don't know if, one, people are interested in hearing me talk, and two, if people would get notified by YouTube. But appreciate those who are hanging and asking questions. Nice to see a lot of familiar names. I'm going to try to do this like more regularly. Part of it is like my fiance is out of town right now, and I have just sort of a free night to myself, so I can go late, just hang and talk Pokemon. Jake, what are your thoughts on the World promos collapsing in price? Jake, what are your thoughts on the Unicarp 99 Win falling in price? So I don't know if you're talking about the English side or the Japanese side, but I can talk about both, certainly, because both have fallen quite a bit. The Japanese ones did explode quite a bit up in price, more than the English ones. The English ones, there have been a ton of auctions. So I can't really go into details, but let's just say that someone who owned a ton of them, like a huge position in them, decided to sell like all of them, and they sold them to someone who was also wanted to flip and resell and grade them all, and is not being patient with them, and is just sort of flooding the market with them. These are cards that there are not that many people who know what they are, who appreciate them, who enjoy collecting them. I think, relative to set cards, obviously. Or relative to like, your Scream your cards or your Ponchu Pikachus or something like that. So when you have, 100 champion stamps, these are cards that are only like 12 to 24 in the world. And I'm sure there are some extra copies, etc. As there are probably with most of these cards, but like the Art Academies and Pikachu Illustrator and whatever, Unicarps, Tropical Winds. When more that have come up for 2 years go on the market, more than come for 3 years, like 10 times more come up for the market in the span of 3 months, it's it's just going to have that impact. It'll be interesting to see, like, with Worlds coming up, if Pokemon content creators make videos about Worlds. I know there was quite a sizable uptick on pretty much all of them after the first Worlds in London after the pandemic. That was a few years ago now. I'm not expecting that much of an uptick like the uptick on that one, but I think awareness, attention to these types of items is massive. So, when you have a very rare item, but also an item that has very little demand, if there's only 30, 50, 150 people interested in them, and 100 of them come up on the market, and we're talking about like $4, $5, $6, $7, $8, $10,000 cards in some cases, it's just, there just isn't enough money to absorb that in the short run. And I think with the Unicarp and the Tropical Wind, those cards are considerably less rare in terms of the amount that were printed, released, likely, right? Unicarp with like an intended distribution of 1,000. People debate how many there really are. Who knows? Tropical Wind, somewhere between probably 500 to 800. They're probably extra copy. Who knows, right? And then who knows how many of those cards survived because, they were beat up, lost to time, didn't have too much value. They're from the 98, 99 to 2000, right? 2001 to 2000 with the Tropical Breeze, and then 2000, and you got your Lucky Stadiums, your gosh, I haven't talked about these cards in a while. Oh, the computer error, these sort of cards that kind of, in my mind, all sort of go together, are often owned by the same type of person in the hobby. I don't know what the prices are on them right now, but it certainly doesn't shock me. I always thought, and I own the Tropical Wind because I like the card and I'm a Worlds collector, but I've always felt that the Unicarp definitely way, in my opinion, was always the most overvalued trophy card relative to the others. Just one man's opinion based on the story of how it was distributed, the amount that was distributed, the Pokemon versus the not having Pikachu. I mean, certainly Magikarp is a fan favorite, but versus the Tropical Wind, at least to me, was as a very historic card in the hobby from the first Worlds given out to participants. But there's just a lot of it. There's a lot of that card. And there's just not a lot of people who can afford a $10,000, $25,000, $50,000 card in a 10, right? Like it's just a lot of money. I think we've seen those types of cards before the boom. Like a PSA 9 Tropical Wind would have been like $8,000-$9,000, and then it went up to like $35,000, and now it's probably like $15,000 to $25,000, right? If it went in an auction. Whereas your Gold Star right now, you could take a Gold Star. Like Gold Stars are seeing like all-time highs right now, for example, like even higher than the boom a few years ago. That's an example of where you have quite a bit of rarity, but you also have a huge amount of popularity. You have quite a bit of condition rarity. You also have absolute rarity of the card. Of course, there's hundreds of thousands of those Gold Stars out there, but there are only 1,000 or so probably graded across all of the population reports in 9 or 10. These trophy cards, of course, there's only 12, 24 of in the world, but people don't know about them. People may not care about them, not connect to them, don't care about the history. They prefer the art. They're more of a set card collector. And I think all of that's valid. In the long run, how all of that's going to pan out, I'm not really sure. For me, the World's promos were always just, relative to other trophy cards, seem to be like some of the most undervalued. And I think that, if you look at the trophy card market in general, you've had illustrators fall, a huge amount. You've had lots of these cards. You've definitely, with the alt arts exploding in popularity, and now people kind of going back into like the middle era and into vintage. And we've seen like vintage PSA 9s, PSA 10s pretty much across the board. Even the Neos now, the Neo Shinings are starting to move. They were sort of lagging, but certainly the Crystals, very much the Gold Stars, right? The EXs, the, going up in price. You're not seeing that same movement on the trophy cards. Again, my instinct would be, if you like these things, like this is the best time to buy since before the boom, because there's a ton of supply on the market, more than there may ever be in the future. Plus, there's a lack of interest. And when prices go down, people just decide that they don't like it or they don't think it's cool. It's only when things get expensive that they become cool. So it's this constant, psychological battle that you have to play with yourself. The reason that people struggle with that is because it's in our nature to doubt our own opinions of things. And then when the market goes down, we say, oh, well, maybe that isn't that good, and maybe no one will ever like it, right? And when things go up, it's like, oh, it was obvious, right? It was a guarantee, right? All that type of stuff. Hey, Jake, what's some of your favorite finance books? I don't have anything too wildly out. So I worked for a while for a I guess it was like a hedge fund small agency, and my boss gave me a bunch of like Ray Dalio books that I'd read because he was a big Ray Dalio fan. I've always been more of a fan of Warren Buffett. The first book that my dad gave me to read when I was interested in investing when I was a kid was The Intelligent Investor. I would start, if you haven't read that, I would start there, in my opinion. And then you can certainly go online and there'll be a million recommendations. And, I'd probably read something. It's always, I think, often smart to start with the people who are the most established and have made the most money and have been successful, and then kind of build out, a framework from there. You can find people who are a little bit more interested, like Ray Dalio, in sort of macro trends and sort of predicting kind of where things are going to go. And then you have people who are more on the assessing sort of the value of what something is right now, and finding those sort of irrationally undervalued things, not because the future is going to change so much, but because because people are being irrational right now, and you expect them to become rational in the future. Like in Pokemon, an example would be like, you look at these cards and you're like, how is this card so cheap and this card so expensive? A value investor might buy that really cheap card, not necessarily with a theory of how it's going to become expensive. Not that you can predict the macro trends, but just with the theory that eventually, likely, people are going to become more rational, and if they become more rational, they'll like that card more. Of course, you could absolutely be wrong. It's hard to particularly with pop culture collectibles, what's really rational and what's not rational is highly, highly up for debate often. Favorite Scarlet and Violet set so far? I mean, I guess my favorite set I haven't been like a big fan, to be honest, and I've mostly been flipping and reselling it. I suppose like 151. I like the New Greninja card. It's okay. Let's see if there are any. There are some arts I really like. I like that Tapu Koko. I forget which set that one's from. It's only like a $12 card. I think that's beautiful art. What other arts did that I looked at and I was like, that's really cool. I mean, I really like the Gardevoir from Paldean Fates. I think it's a nice card. Nothing too amazing for me. I really liked the Mew that became a promo in Japanese as part of the set, but that became a promo in 151. I think that was a nice looking card. I like the Legendary Birds card from that set, but yeah, it's I don't think it's been bad. I just don't think it's been like very exciting. And there's just a lot of stuff that I still like to collect and go after in the vintage world and the middle era world that I'm not blown away by anything, ultra modern. And then also it's the lack of rarity, the fact that I can more easily get it, all that stuff I think also contributes to maybe a little bit less excitement. Of course that can shift and change if it becomes more valuable and people go crazy off, after it. Jake, how is the Illustrator still considered rare with all the auctions? I mean, rarity is subjective, right? So, excuse me, rarity is not subjective. I don't know, my brain is rarity, like the rarity is relative is the best way to put it, right? So scarcity is the more interesting conversation, right? Because scarcity is is really what more can determine the value, because it really has to do with the relationship between the amount of those cards that are on the market at any given time that are actually for sale and the amount of buyers looking for those cards at any one given time, right? So the Illustrator, there could be only 50 let's just say that there isn't, but let's say there are 100 copies of the Illustrator in the world, just for, again, I'm not saying there are, but just for purposes of making the math more simple, there are 100 copies of the Illustrator in the world, and let's say there are 40 buyers, okay? If 50, 60 of the, there are 40 buyers at the current price, but 60 of them come on the market, they're going to fall in price because there won't be enough buyers to continue to buy and keep it at that price. Like what happened to the World's cards, in my opinion. And it doesn't necessarily mean the card is as rare as it's always been. It's just not as scarce as maybe people thought it would be at these prices. Now, if the price comes way, way down, then the card might actually become quite scarce again. And then that might push the price back up, because now there might be more people looking, a lot of people looking for it, but not a lot of people willing to sell it. That same thing can happen with the World's promos. The same thing can happen with set cards too. Low pop cards, middle pop cards, even pop, like let's take the Moonbryon, right? Like extremely popular card. There may just not ever be nearly enough of those to go around. Let's just say theoretically with the demand, that could end up becoming a scarce card one day. If that's the case, we'll all be in amazing shape. Let's all cross our fingers for that happening for anyone who wants the hobby to succeed. If a card like that becomes truly scarce, but that doesn't mean that it certainly is not relatively rare compared to a card that is only 50 of, or that there's only 12 of, or that there's only one of, right? So these are those terms. And I see people like YouTubers obviously misuse these terms. A lot of them are misusing them intentionally just for clicks, which who cares? Like, it's totally fine. But it can feel a little misleading, of course, whatever. But people who might have a title like rarest card in the world or rarest Pokemon sale ever, and it's like, and people like me might have that moment of like, well, it's not the rarest. It's like, come on, like, we're deep in the rabbit hole. There are news articles trying to get clicks. Go onto Facebook or anywhere right now and go look at the types of clickbait that are there. There's ridiculous clickbait there. Go click on something that has nothing to do with the article, so that's just the world that the majority of Pokemon news, like any big Pokemon news, is going to go through that sort of like greatest common denominator clickbaity lens, versus like a channel like this where we're nerdy enough and care enough and to try and be accurate or as accurate as we can be, almost neurotically, right? Thoughts on tag? Don't have too many. Don't really have thoughts. I haven't used them myself. I haven't really checked them out enough, so I probably wouldn't want to share my thoughts on a company when I don't really have any experience with them. Jake, how do you think the market will react if Pokemon International decides to reprint sets like Pokemon Japan is doing right now? Not something I know much about, honestly. Christian, if you want to share, if you have some thoughts, I'd be interested to hear. I can put them on screen when I get there at some point. I definitely think it's been a big topic of conversation in the Patreon over the last 4 months. It's definitely come up almost every week, if not every week in office hours. So a lot of Japanese sealed box speculators in there. So definitely a big topic of conversation. What's up, Ben? Jake, don't you collect championship rings, being the coach of the Celtics? Well, I do refer to them as us or we when I talk about them. So me and every other moron Boston Celtics fan, we all deserve rings, right? For our contributing efforts. I mean, we help pay their salaries by watching the games. Hey, what's up, Colson? I mentioned you earlier. Hopefully I'll see you sometime this year. That would be nice. There's a number of people I would love to hopefully I catch it at a convention or a show this year that I really haven't come into contact with. Jake, did you reveal who's that business partner? My business partner's name is Dylan. So a lot of people have met him, people who come to shows. He was actually a former winner of the Pokemon World Championships. So he got his own trophy and his own trophy card and his own physical trophy, and that's kind of cool. So he's got a great background, and he's been doing Pokemon and engaged in Pokemon since he was a little kid, and family is engaged in Pokemon too. Knows a ton about the game. Is also just a good game player and savvy, trustworthy guy. And yeah, he's someone who I met a few years ago, and we developed sort of a friendship over the last few years, seeing each other every 4 to 5 months or so. And then, kind of like a little bit on a whim decided, hey, like, you're looking for a job right now. I could use some help with these things. Let's temporarily try this out. And if it works out, maybe we'll, go full time and partner on it at some point. So, but yeah, he's a great guy, and we'll both be in New Jersey if people would like to meet him. Hey, what's up, Breeks? Do you think 151 English will reprint? No idea. Zero idea on reprints, and certainly zero idea on English reprints. If you get some insider info, let me know. I always used to say when I was on YouTube and I was asked those questions, it's like I would probably go to like someone who deals a lot in sealed product and has distributor connections, and if they're willing to share some of their info about, they won't be able to tell you like, will it get a big reprint, but they might be able to tell you like, oh, they're being offered more of this. Maybe there's still a lot back, in the back, whatever. Hey, Isaiah, Pokenomics, where have you been? My dad, who went to get milk, reappears more than you. Good to see you. Thanks for hanging out. Believe it or not, I'm like more engaged and busy in the Pokemon hobby than ever. Just not in the content space. I do Pokemon all the time. What's up, to Green Shiz? How are you, man? Hopefully I'll see you soon too. Black Rose Collectibles, always good to see that name. Nice to see you. Let's see. Any thoughts on Japanese 151 pretty forward right now after the reprints? Definitely, like, that's a lot of people's opinions, like in the Patreon and the Discord, that like I know a lot of people who I think are, tend to make money in the space and do and tend to be pretty thrifty, have a similar take and bought a lot of it. And then your point about it being fun to rip, totally agree. It's like one of my favorite sets to rip at that price. I also love Shiny Treasure. I probably prefer to rip Shiny Treasure just because it's like literally half the price. It's so cheap, but they're both fun. The thing I like about 151 is the Master Ball makes it a little bit fun, and the hits from Shiny Treasure are just so like bad unless you get like one of 3 cards. Even they're just so rough, financially and even art wise, they're just kind of boring-ish. They're not super interesting or exciting. Like I prefer in 151, I really like a number of the arts. They're different, and I even like some of the holos. Like I really like the Dragon Knight holo, super cute. So like I want to get it in like a Master Ball. I don't know. There's a lot of good arts that you could get in the Master Ball, and it makes it fun. But yeah, they're all good rips for sure right now. Let's see. Hopefully my computer's still working all right. We're making some progress here. Hey Nathan, how you doing? Ethan Grubb says pre-XY, which eras had the least amount of people in the hobby? Well, I don't know that for sure. But if we were going to speculate that Pokemon probably printed the least because there were the least amount of people in the hobby, and talking to people who like did a lot of tournaments, and like, because a lot of the hardcore people buying more were actually like playing the game during those periods. So there were still collectors too, obviously. They talk about like 2004, or like 2002, like Power Keepers, there was actually a little bit of an increase, I've heard people say, and more of that was printed. There was a little bit more popular for some reason. I don't know. And then certainly into the like level X, like the Diamond and Pearl Platinum era, super, super low. By the end of like Aquapolis into Skyridge, super low. But I don't know how to compare. I would assume that the lowest are Diamond and Pearl, Heart Gold, Soul Silver. But original Nintendo EX era and Skyridge and are all pretty low, and certainly Black and White is also pretty low. Even the sort of beginning of X and Y pre-evolutions, in particular the first half of X and Y, seems pretty low. How do you feel about negotiating for collections on Facebook? I find it difficult to negotiate members of groups and marketplace. Yeah, it's very, very hit or miss. It's a lot of it is about casting a wide net, putting in a lot of work, and then dealing with rejection is too strong of a word, but dealing with a lot of like falling through. And then you certainly have to deal with a variety of personalities and, stemming, from people who are just huge time wasters and scammers and try to scam you, and then you have to get your money back, to just people who like are just asking, over market on their cards to, whatever it is. They have at the end of the day, they have no obligation to sell their cards to anyone, and you have no obligation to buy their cards. But it is nice when people are do their best not to waste each other's time or mislead each other, and that's good, part of good negotiating skills. And it's nice when people are, I think, upfront. But I mean, I've had the whole range. I've had people like, oh my gosh, thank you so much. You've completely got me out of a bind. Thank you for buying this. You paid way more. You paid more than I thought you were going to, way more, blah, 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 to like totally offended by my offer. Like, you're a nasty flipper reseller. Like, I'm looking I'm really attached to these cards. I want like 120% of market. How dare you offer me like 85% or 80% or something, right? So it's you get the whole range, and it's just about the being on there a lot and engaging a lot. And there can be weeks where you buy nothing, and even a month where you buy nothing, and you feel like you've wasted a lot of time. But then you get one or you get a couple, and it sort of evens out. It's part of what I said in the beginning when someone asked me, like, one of the hard parts about doing this full time is the inconsistency, and the like emotionally that can be hard. The doing a lot of work to not having any success, but knowing that you just need to sort of like put in that time can be mentally, a bit challenging. If it was too easy, everyone would do it. There's the truth. If it was too easy and too fun, everyone would do it. With Sword and Shield booming the last months, do you think older cards, like maybe the lowercase EX cards or Eaters, will boom next, or Scarlet and Violet next, or will nothing pop? I don't know. I do know that like there are plenty of vintage cards that have doubled and tripled in price. I don't know. I don't watch YouTube anymore, so I don't know if YouTubers are telling people that, or that's part of the narrative at all. But there's lots of low pop stuff that's gone up considerably, and then there are cards that are they're vintage cards, big cards that are actually still trending down slightly. Until recently, like the Neo Shinings, for example, were flattish down. And I even got a couple of really crazy deals on like Facebook and some other places on some of those. They have in like the last week, I've noticed like they've been starting to tick up. Who knows how deep that trend is, how long lasting that trend is. But, these are the types of, part of why people don't talk as much about these markets is like it's also the type of thing where like there could be like one sale every few months on a lot of these cards. And it could seem like there's no movement in the market, or there's drastic up movement or drastic down movement, but really it's like one sale, and you need more data points to really see an overall trend. So that's why I always hesitate too. It's way easier to see the trend of the Moonbreon when there's like 100 sales a day and you see every sale going higher, right? The the movements on those cards are much easier for the average person to see and pay attention to, even if you're not into that card or into those sets. So, definitely the alt arts, talking about them every month, certainly for 6 months on the Patreon, on the monthly live, about what's been happening there, from the boxes going up in price to then the alt arts, the cards starting to go up in price. Obviously that Umbreon V that PokeRev talked about in a video, whatever, if that really, who knows if that caused it or not. The timing was funny. That card really hugely jumps, and then, within 3 weeks, every other card had jumped a lot. And, since then, the Moonbreon, I think, topped out raw. I think I was seeing them sell for maybe $1,000. Now I'm seeing the lows at like 750. The market average TCG is probably around 850 right now. It might be 840, 830. Still slightly trending down. That card's held up pretty well, though. You have the Rayquaza V that got up to like 160, 170, and that's come down to like 110. So that's a pretty sharp fall on a percentage basis. That's like a 60% fall, 60, 70% fall. So if you bought that card at like 180 as an investment or a speculation, thinking you would double your money to 360, now you need to 4x your money to double your money, which is how the danger of sort of speculating on fast moving things is, like, the trend is your friend while it's going up, but it's and that doesn't mean that it won't quadruple in the next few years. I just don't know, but I certainly watch these things every day, and I'm buying and selling and speculating and pricing these cards every day. So all the price knowledge and the price history is up there, and it's likely, knowing what YouTube used to be like when I was on here, the majority of the takes are going to be like part of the information, or using some information to make a point, rather than sharing sort of the more complete picture of what's going on. It's very easy to manipulate slices of data to make some point if you're trying to argue for a specific side or specific point. And for people watching out there, like, it's unlikely that, unless you guys are full-time like me and create, or super passionate and deep, that you're going to know all the price history, that you're going to know all the different things, that you're going to be tracking all of that. So it's very easy for incorrect narratives to be built up. And then, of course, the narratives have real effects on prices. Now, as an investor, speculator, flipper, the false narratives are good for me, because they create more irrationality, temporary irrationality in the market that I can theoretically take advantage of. But the goal of this channel, the goal of talking to people, is not to mislead people so that I have an advantage. Let's see. What are your top 3 favorite modern Japanese sets, and why? So I don't know what you would include as modern. I generally am an English collector. I did say that, like, I like the black and white and XY. I actually prefer the Japanese. I don't even think I can name the names of the set in Japanese. I'm trying to think which ones I like the best, even. And then I'm going to try to think of the Japanese name. What is it, like Sky Stream? And I don't know. In the Scarlet and Violet, I answered this question earlier, and I just don't. I have like a few cards that I like, but I'm not sure any of the sets, other than maybe 151, Paldean, Paldean Fates, or EX Treasure in Japanese. But if we talk about, like, if we go back to Sword and Shield and we go back to Sun and Moon, there aren't any like Japanese specific things that I like more than the English, but there's lots of cards and a number of sets. I mean, a lot of the cards that are very expensive that people really like, I like too. I I really like the Gengar and Mimikyu from Team Up. Gosh, I have the Japanese box, but I forgot the name of the box. Anyway, I'm sure someone here can help me out with that in the chat. But, I think, is it Remix Bout? Someone's going to tell me. Can't remember which one it is. And Japanese sets also, like, sometimes they have half the cards of one set, half the cards of the other. And I don't think that it's in that. No, I think that, is that Cosmic Eclipse Remix Bout? I don't know. Maybe I'm confused. Either way, it's not important. I really like that Gengar and Mimikyu card, particularly the non-full art one, just the regular GX. I also really like the full art one, and I like the alt art one too. That's a card that stands out to me. I really like the Dragonite V alt card. That's probably my favorite card from that era. But I'm a Dragonite, I'm a big Dragonite fan, so that's probably why. Yeah. Christian Diaz says, I just think people are coping with the Japanese reprints thing is good for the market. I think investor sentiment will crater if the same things happen in the English side. Again, it's the age-old question of how much that market's being pumped up by that versus people just opening the product, Cubone is metal. I will say though that like a few weeks ago, so the alt arts are now that I'm at these vending shows all the time, and I have these really funny interactions with people who are like, all of a sudden they start like becoming an investor in something now that something gets expensive, the same old pattern when like 2 weeks ago they weren't interested in it. And then when it starts coming down, they come to me to try to sell it. So I wasn't able to buy the cards at like a much higher price. And now they really want to sell it to me now that it's lower because they're worried it's going to keep falling. So that will happen to some degree. But if it's only a small part, if that's only like a small part of the market or a small enough part of the market, that might happen and there might be some of that activity, but then in the long run, that stuff might get gobbled up and opened up if it gets cheaper. And in the long run, it may not matter to the overall long-term price trajectory of some of that sealed product. It's just impossible to know. Jake, what is your thoughts on holding cards just because you think they are undervalued? Sometimes I'm price checking cards and say to myself, this is too cheap, but in reality, I can buy again. I mean, seems rational to me. I mean, I think it's normal. I think that, if you're feeling that way, maybe you're trying to make some rational analysis of it. And you're saying, all right, well, there aren't that many of this card, and I just think it's too cheap compared to this other thing. But the reality is, if you go online and you see like there's hundreds and hundreds on TCG Player for all the same price, and it would take a large demand shift or change in order for that card to go up in value. You'd need a buyout of some sort that you or other people would do, right? So will that happen? How long would it take to happen? These are things that there's just probably better opportunities. There are things that are maybe like more obviously just buying low, selling high is unless something really feels like a home run, it's usually the way to go in terms of making money rather than investing or speculating. But from like the collector side, absolutely. Like there'll be things that like I wait till something feels too cheap, or that's when I start collecting it often, if it was something I wanted to collect the whole time. But your question seems to imply that like you don't want to own the card, you don't care about the card, but you still think it's too cheap. And that to me is a little bit gets into that space of like, well then what makes you think it's too cheap? Because if you don't like it and you don't want it, and you're just buying it to speculate on it, are other people going to just buy to speculate? Is it really that good of a collectible? Like, and I'm not telling you that it is or isn't, but that's what comes to my mind. At the end of the day, like the floor value of a lot of these cards is a collector buying it because they would rather have the card than the money, not because they're buying it to hopefully make money in the future. Right. Jake, do you like those gold and black cards? I feel like they're undervalued. So which ones specifically? Like on the English side, like some of the promo ones, like I would say they don't, just being honest, like they don't hit a specific chord with me, but like maybe, I don't know. I feel like there's so much of everything right now that I wouldn't say they're like overvalued. I mean, a lot of those cards, like the Pikachu one, I think is like $5 or something. The Pikachu VMAX, like gold, like could that get like bought out? Like if you went on TCG Player right now, like how many of that card is up for sale at $5? Like if you bought up a bunch of those cards, you could probably raise the price to 10 and then maybe slowly sell them at 10. Like, and people would maybe buy them. And then if people saw it moving, maybe that would make them more interested. Or if you did a buyout up to 10 and then listed them, maybe no one would buy them and you just be sitting on them forever because no one wanted them. Right. So it's like, I don't know. I don't do things like that. I don't particularly, and I'm not saying you are doing things like that or anyone here is, I don't particularly like that whole thing. I think that's kind of, it feels icky to me on some level to, it feels like you're tricking people and you're sort of making people, you're tricking people's dopamine. Like, you're creating fake sort of market activity or movement that looks a certain way to profit yourself that will likely hurt the people who you're tricking. And I just don't like doing things like that. I don't think it's necessary to be a good investor to win the game of investing. Hey, Jake, do you still have the thesis that today's younger audience will want to collect vintage in the future more than the current and future modern cards? I wouldn't say like it's a more than, it's just a supplier and demand thing. So I think that the two, I definitely still have the same theses and thoughts that I've had all along. I'm sure they've shifted in ways I'm not even aware of, but my feeling is always like there's just going to be more and more modern sets competing with other modern sets, and maybe the alt arts, maybe some things will be relevant, maybe some Pokemon will matter, but will it all matter? Probably not. And if it does, I don't think it will matter a lot. Like the vast majority of it, I don't think will matter as much as the original sets. That's what we see in every hobby that I can think of. So, that follows that type of pattern. So again, if you're not betting on that, you're sort of betting against a lot of data. But there are, like, one example I can think of is like there are really old coins that like way older and rarer, but people aren't interested in them because they're only like American coin collectors. So if there's a ton of American coin collectors and there aren't that many like of these of coin collector theoretically, right? Just because these coins came first and are maybe more historic and you think should be more interesting, whatever, rarer, doesn't mean that they'll be more valuable if that collecting category gets kind of separated. So if WotC Pokemon, for example, gets like separated or pushed away and people are just like, I don't like collecting WotC, and it's just like Nintendo EX era on are the only things that I collect and the only things I want to collect, and that ends up being like a massive part of the collector market. For sure, like WotC specifically could be not that valuable. Particularly when you think about that a lot of that WotC stuff was printed a huge amount, particularly like the Unlimited, particularly the stuff in lower grade, particularly the first few sets outside of like first edition base. I wouldn't bet on that. That seems like a pretty unlikely scenario, but it's one I can come up with from the top of my head. Like there are some examples of things like that. It's why it's so impossible to predict demand. So like my frustration online was always just like people predicting things that I don't think they can predict, and not even using, at least if you're gonna predict something, use some other hobbies, use some sort of historical examples to be like, here's how human nature worked over here, and that's why I think it's going to happen in this hobby, right? So I think that things will play out. I'm hoping I'm roughly at around like 60 to 70% right about most things, and then I will do extremely well investing and speculating in this space, right? I mean, that's sort of the general goal over time. I try to be patient, consistent. Obviously, other people's opinions I am interested in and I listen to, but ultimately, it's important to do what you think makes the most sense, and I really would listen to and engage with people and hobbies and things that are far more experienced than Pokemon. The vast majority of people here, including myself, are very young and very inexperienced, and should probably not be giving too much advice that isn't grounded in something that's a lot bigger than themselves, yeah. Yeah, I mean, I'm not investing in any Pokemon just as a pure investment. So I haven't since the boom, and I'm still not, because I personally don't think it's the best. I think that the places like the stock market are a better place for me, and there's lots of reasons why, for me to be investing in. But I also like to collect, and when I'm collecting, I am also speculating and investing. But a big part of the reason I'm doing this is because I really enjoy it, not just because I'm trying to maximize money. It's that hybrid thing. Now, that doesn't mean that I don't think things will go up, and I don't think people will make money. First of all, I really hope everything goes up forever. It can't, but and second, I'm not even like, if you asked me like, will this Japanese booster box be like, what will it be in the next 6? Like if you buy 151 at $45 a box, which was the lowest it got, or $50 a box, Jake, what do you think it'll be in 2 years? I would say, well, who the hell knows? But, probably somewhere between $80 and $150. And that's a pretty good investment. But the reason why I wouldn't invest in it, even if I think that there's a better than 50% chance of that box doubling in price, is because if it only doubles in price, the amount of effort, time, space, the time for me to sell it, the fees in selling that box, the annoyance of having it here and taking up a lot of space, and for me to actually make money on something like that, I would need to put like money that would be like, oh, this is like a big play. It would need to be like, for me, it would need to be like $50,000 or something I put into a box like that, and that would take up a massive amount of space and be a massive, huge headache to sell. Whereas I can just click one button and buy $50,000 of shares in something that's going to pay me a dividend. And there's a decent, and there's a above a 30% chance, I would say, that box is still at $50 to $70, above a 30% chance that or around a 30%, I'm just coming up the top of my head, but like, because there's a 30% chance I'm going to get wrecked, not wrecked, but like, I basically would have to like sling those boxes at shows in order to get rid of them. And I would just have like a ton of money tied up. Right. But that doesn't mean that I don't think the most likely scenario is this. This was always the thing on YouTube, is that people don't hear nuance. They hear, They hear, well, if you think it's a bad investment, that means you think it's going to go down. That's a total misunderstanding of the time value of money, and the fact that you have a certain amount of money and there are certain amount of you have so many different opportunities, and places you can put that money, and that money can be time consuming for you, and or could be space consuming, like buying lots of sealed product, or it could be, or I could put all of that money into a stock, or I could put that money into a collection, which I'm going to enjoy a lot more than having those boxes, which is just going to be a headache and irritate me and annoy me. I'm going to enjoy having these cards more. And although maybe I don't think it's as good of an investment, although I don't necessarily think that, and that would be I think that there are plenty of vintage cards that I was buying 4 or 5 months ago. I mean, there are cards that I bought 4 or 5 months ago that have doubled or tripled in value, right? When you're very engaged in markets, there are often ways to buy things that you enjoy having, that are easy to store, that are fun to have, that you believe in long term, that you want to hold long term, that you also think could go up in value because you have some sort of thesis that makes some sense. And I just suggest that people put in the effort to sort of do that, and be thoughtful, I guess, because I think you'll enjoy the hobby the most. But certainly, like, buying that 151 box, buying a bunch of that, buying a bunch of like EX treasures at like $25 a box or whatever the heck it is, $30 a box, like buying some of the reprints that, of the Sword and Shield era. Like, I mean, some of these Japanese boxes just a few years ago, in just a few years, went from being $40, $35 to $160. And could that happen again? Absolutely. But it may not. What percentage would you put on it? And again, I'm saying, 50, 60%. I'm pulling these numbers out of where, right? And that's part of why it's not really an investment. It's speculation, and gambling is a better word for it, because you really don't have much data to go on other than just the past few years of Japanese boxes, which I think is pretty weak. It's a pretty weak argument, personally. Speculating on those Evolving Skies booster boxes in the pallets. Yeah, I mean, I got lucky to buy even just, I think I bought 6 cases when it hit. I think I got mine at like between 85 and 95. And there were some on Facebook that were selling a little bit lower. And then I bought a few on eBay that were a little bit higher. But I didn't feel really strongly about it. And I was kind of like, I guess I have some extra money. I guess I'll throw my money into it. It's one of these examples of like, those could still be $85 right now. Like, and if they were, the whole, like, people's feelings would be totally different. It's a very irrational, emotional, people saying, oh, it's a sure thing. It's very silly. This is why I'm not liked on YouTube by some people. Why is Rajon Rondo underrated? You think he's underrated? I don't know about that. Playoff Rondo, though, was definitely a thing, right? Are there cards that you think that if you don't buy it today, that you won't be able to buy it for the same price or cheaper 5 years from now? If the hobby grows, I think most cards I'm buying right now, I'm hoping will be more valuable in 5 years from now. Now, it is possible, just like what happened in the sports card market and what happened in the comic book market, that there was a decade of just down period where there just weren't that many people interested in it. Like, we might be in an up period of five years right now, and then we might be in a down period for 10 years. We might be in an up period for 10 years, down period for 2 years. I just don't know. And if a really down period, which I don't think this is, if we hit one like that, where just more people lose interest rather than more people keep coming in and collecting. And again, that's something it's not going to be easy to, you're not going to just notice it one day. It'll probably be slow. Things will theoretically, will likely be cheaper, 5 years from now. The passage of time can make pop culture collectibles irrelevant. One of the biggest like fallacies that's in the pokey investor space is that time is your friend, and if you just hold stuff, it will become more valuable. No, that's not true. If you hold stuff for a long time, it can turn that item from super relevant, a lot of people want that item, to this item is now irrelevant and nobody cares about it. You know, Evolution's Charizard is a good example of that. People were obsessed with that card. That card's gone on 90% in value in PSA 10 and PSA 9. 95% in value and has not recovered. It's just one tiny example, but there will probably be lots of examples of that in Pokemon at some point. But the cards today it may not happen to the cards today. It may happen to the cards in 5 years, right? Like this is, but it's natural that markets have the up and down and that sort of flow. Like you have to expect periods like that. It's not just going to be sustained growth forever or sustained consistency forever. That being said, there are certain cards and there are certain items that are most likely to stand the test of time the best. And those are going to be ones that are going to have a relatively low supply and a relatively high demand. There are going to be items that are scarce. So to your question here, if items become more scarce, then there will be more FOMO. Then there will be people, when they come up for auction, when they come up for sale, people will be like, oh, I need to get that. Oh, I'll pay an extra 5, 10, 20%. A lot of people today, for pretty much every card, are in sort of the I'm looking for a deal mindset, unless that card is actively trending up. We're in that. In 2020, during the bubble, people were asking like 120% of market, 140% of market, and people were paying for it, right? Because they were worried that another one wasn't going to come up and they thought it was going to double and triple. Like that type of feeling. We certainly are not in that right now, but we're also not in a feeling, we're also not in the reverse, in my opinion, in the super negative place. I think we're figuring it out, as a group of hundreds of thousands of people who are interested in this, and then more broadly millions, right? There's massive amounts of interest and engagement. Hi, Jake. Any tips on removing getting over emotional attachment to cards? Every time I acquire cards I don't have, I feel the need to add them to the collection instead of trying to move them. So definitely like very personal question. I'll answer this for myself because I don't know exactly what, like, certainly things can become, you can have an unhealthy emotional attachment to something if it's like negatively impacting other areas of your life, i.e. spending too much money, taking time away from loved ones, from other hobbies, and your life gets worse because of that emotional attachment. If that describes you, sure, you lessening that emotional attachment or selling that card might be the right move. But in a lot of cases, I kind of think like it's nice that you like something and you care about something and you're having fun and enjoying it, and why feel guilty over something that you like? So again, I might have that take based on what's happening in your life. It's like, oh, right? It's like, oh, I'm noticing that it's having this hugely negative impact on your life. Okay, maybe you should consider selling it. Maybe we should help you or push you to get over sort of that emotional attachment, or push away those feelings, compartmentalize those feelings. Feelings are something that should be looked at and explored, and you should try to get to the bottom of them. Why am I having these feelings? And do I like these feelings? Do I not like these feelings? If I don't like these feelings, why am I having these feelings? And is there a way to figure out or change something in my life so that I have different feelings or have less of these feelings, or I change my thinking? Even sometimes just changing your thinking and your understanding of your feelings can change your relationship to the feelings, and then can change the feelings to some degree. Your intellectual relationship to your feelings can actually change the feelings. So anyway, but as far as like specific tips, like if you were someone who, I would say like ask a friend to sell it for you, use a consignment service, do something that will make it less painful and less emotional for you to sell. I think for people who don't have selling experience, part of it can be like the anxiety of selling and the frustration of selling, and learning something new can be hard. And so when you don't want to sell something, plus you have to learn these new skills that are not necessarily you're going to be using all of the time, it can be just better to just send it to a consignor, pay an extra like 3 to 5%, and just you'll be so happy. You'll be happy you did, you know. Particularly, I would say if it's a card that you can get back fairly easily, or if it's a card that wasn't gifted to you, or there's something specific about that graded card or that specific card that means something to you. But very personal decision, you know, for you or for anyone else, kind of where they are on that spectrum, I would say. And I've been all over that spectrum, you know. I mean, I definitely, you know, there have been times where I was really not enjoying my job, or times when I was just bored. Boredom can be a big thing, where I would buy something or want to buy something, or just because I'm trying to fill the time with something interesting or exciting, something to engage myself. And it wasn't necessarily like catastrophic, but it wasn't the best. Like, you know, I probably would have been better if I had gotten up and gone for a run. Of course, that would have been, doesn't feel as good, but that's life, right? You often have those decisions in front of you, and sometimes we choose the one that makes us feel better in the long run, and other times we choose the immediate gratification, and it's pretty understandable why we choose immediate gratification sometimes, I think. Very human. Yeah, exactly. Sure. You know, so you are going to find these examples, but then if you look at how that coin market developed and how American coin collecting might be such a different group of people, particularly like Americans who have a lot of money, you know, or people across the world who are like specifically interested in American culture, have a lot of money. It's a little bit easier for me to set, just like instinctually, not knowing the coin market super well. We used to have people in our Discord Patreon who were like coin experts, used to give like some talks once in a while in the Discord on coins, which I loved listening to. But you know, it seems more easy for me to separate coins from this country, coins from that country, coins from different 1,000 years apart than it would be to separate WotC from the rest of the hobby. But it would be easier for me to separate WotC from the rest of the hobby than it would be for me to separate, for somehow like Sword and Shield alt arts from everything that came before, like some people might want to. You know, I just, it feels artificial. It doesn't logically make sense other than just sort of like short-term emotions. I'm not sure why that would be the case in the long run, but it doesn't mean that it couldn't be. And I do think separating WotC from the rest, you know, it's just like a lot of people with really strong opinions about that are just trying to push up the value of their own cards these days. Like whatever cards they own. I always feel like it's like, you know, most people who have loud opinions in the space are just have their own personal sort of incentives that they're working on, in my opinion. For sure. So I think I'm going to go about just like a couple more minutes here. It looks like we're almost through all the questions anyway. Appreciate those of you who hung out with me tonight. Going to try to come on, you know, more frequently. Hopefully we'll get, you know, some new people on the channel new people in the chat. I love all of you guys, but new people who are new to Pokemon and, you know, are interested and have some, you know, interesting questions, and I, you know, can start a good conversation. I think that's probably the main thing I miss from being on YouTube. It's just the meeting new you know, I have sort of like the crew that been hanging out with for three to 4 years now, but you know, new people who are still kind of getting into it. Appreciate that, Stephen Lee. Nice to see you. Who's gonna love Heatron like I do in 20 years? Putting together the Heatron. Are you still buying stack attackers? Let's see. It looks like there's one more question here, and then I think I'll probably, if anyone has a last minute thing, feel free to put it, but we'll probably wrap up. Do you keep up with vintage Japanese at all? I love the gold borders for the shinings. I do. Do you have like any specific questions about it? So like generally speaking, Japanese middle era continues to do pretty well, hold decent values. If we go to the WotC era, I don't follow too closely like the sort of WotC, the non-shinings, like the cards that the one holo per pack, or in the case of like base set, one holo every other pack. Generally speaking, outside of the no rarity, I feel like these cards have been mostly stagnant from what I've seen, and in auctions tend not to do that well. But in buy it nows, you can sell them for like quite a bit more than auctions. So sometimes I do pick up some of these cards, like some PSA 9s for like $20, $25, and then I can sell them for like $50. Occasionally I see some decent disparity on it. The shinings, a bunch of them were graded and sold over the last like 6 months through Rare Candy, although that's really slowed down. And that definitely depressed the price quite a bit, I think. There's just a lot more of it on the market than there had been. Those cards are relatively pretty rare, unlike the English where you're pulling like 3 to 6 a box from Neo Destiny. On the Japanese side, I've heard anything from like you pull one every 3 boxes to one every 6 boxes or something. So, and that's 60 packs a box. I don't know if anyone's ever opened enough to really know that 100% for sure, but that's the general consensus that I've heard, years ago when I was, new to this, reading forum posts, reading, some of the people who've been here for a long time and actually were opening lots of boxes back in the day. So those cards came down quite a bit, but I think they've stabilized-ish. I know I bought a few recently. Sometimes in auctions they can go quite low. I sold them like a year and a half ago. I was definitely selling them for quite a bit more. But it's weird. There's like a big range. Like I'll buy like a PSA 7 for like a PSA 7 Mewtwo I'll get for like 400 in an auction, and then I'll be able to sell it for like 700 buy it now. It's a weird small niche market, is what I would say. Appreciate the kind word, Yangarstan. Appreciate the kind words. Always appreciate the support, Black Rose. You say booyah, nice to see you. Well, thank you all for hanging. It was fun. It was fun coming on and dipping my toe back in. Hopefully it was it's a fun conversation. Nice to see some familiar faces, people who are, I only really connect with through YouTube. I'm sure I'm definitely going to feel like coming on again, probably later in the week. I have a feeling before I go to New Jersey. So we'll see. Maybe I'll ask someone to come on with me and we'll do another hangout. But yeah, appreciate everyone. If you do want to support me, you can subscribe to the channel. Dan, Catch 'em All Collectibles, and I have a Patreon where there's Discord connected to it, where we do weekly talks on the market, deep dives into data. Once a month, we do a live Zoom where we do deep dives. It's $10 a month. If that's something you're interested in, it helps support Dan and I in our businesses. And we appreciate it. And hopefully it's good value for people who decide to do it. Yeah. Thanks again, everybody. And I'll see you all next time. Take care, everyone.